I make this video in fear and trepidation of the response from some people, but I do think there's some things that are true and that they need saying. So even if I sometimes feel like a bit of a lone voice saying these things, I do think it's important that these points are put across, and well, it seems like that's my job. Right, Kate Forbes. I regard Kate Forbes as a fellow Christian. I think she shares my faith, and we share a lot of values as well. Now, when Kate Forbes has been in hot water to do with expressing aspects of that, I've been the first and most vigorous to defend her about that. I would ask whether Kate Forbes has ever defended any other Christian who's found themselves in hot water. I'm not aware of ever having done that, but I've certainly sprung to her defence very, very vigorously. Now, Kate Forbes speaks of her personal faith, which I think is great. That's a very positive thing. But I don't think it's a brave thing. It's not controversial to talk about how your faith gives you meaning and purpose in your life, etc. I mean, Hamza Yousaf spoke about his Muslim faith in the same way. That's not brave because it's not controversial. In fact, people quite like that. They think it makes you distinctive or whatever. But yeah, it's good that she does that. That's a very positive thing. So in some ways, Kate Forbes and I, we're sort of on the same team. We're sort of sharing a lot of values, I think. Now, in one sense, I'm sort of on Kate's side. But on the other hand, I'm also on the side of the unborn. I'm on the side of pastors who might get prosecuted and convicting for counselling people with unwanted same-sex attraction. I'm on the side of children. I don't want them to be corrupted in schools. I'm on the side of pro-life activists who want to go and pray outside abortion clinics. I want to offer help to women going there and to save lives in the process. So it's not just a blind loyalty, a blind agreement with Kate Forbes. I've got other priorities as well. Now, why do I believe that Kate believes, roughly speaking, what I believe in terms of Christian values? Well, she's a member of the Free Church of Scotland, but so is Ian Blackford. Well, the last I heard he was. The Free Church of Scotland actually issued a statement a few years ago sort of mildly admonishing Ian Blackford, saying, you're not standing up for the values of our church. You're contradicting them. And they left it at that. So why do I think Kate Forbes really believes them? Well, here's the reason. If you look at the leadership election campaign, SNP leadership election campaign last year, early on, Kate Forbes said she would have voted against same-sex marriage. And massive attacks on her. Now, did Kate Forbes have any motivation to be lying and to be saying, I would have voted against same-sex marriage, when actually she wouldn't have done? Was she just saying that out of self-interest? Well, obviously not. Obviously not. She was saying that because it is actually what she believed. And she said that despite the negative consequences. Later in the campaign, she then said things which are the opposite of Free Church of Scotland teaching. For example, she said she thought homosexual relationships were not wrong, abortion is not wrong. So why did she say those things? I think she said those things, but the explanation is they were things that made life easier for her. They were things in her self-interest. So which Kate Forbes do I believe? Which Kate Forbes is the real Kate Forbes? I think it's the one who says things that are costly. And I think that is our insight into her genuine values. So in a sense, even within politics, we maybe share some similar goals. But Kate Forbes is a politician. And in politics, the way it works in democracy is politicians criticise each other. So when Kate Forbes says abortion's not wrong, access to abortion should continue, the killing of the unborn should definitely continue, and I promise that it would if I was leader of the nation, well, I profoundly disagree with that. Now, when some people hear that, they think, oh, well, but there's an overriding principle. It's all very well you thinking you want to defend the unborn, but there's a more important moral principle that you're contravening here. And the overriding moral principle is that you shouldn't criticise Kate Forbes. Now, people obviously wouldn't put it like that, but for some people, sadly, strangely, that seems to be what it amounts to. But I obviously don't agree with that. So I do think in some ways Kate Forbes has gone off the rails in her public statements on some issues. I've mentioned them already. I won't keep banging on about them. Something else she said as well was about the conversion therapy ban. She said that she believes conversion therapy is abhorrent. So in other words, church leaders helping people to live according to biblical teaching. Kate Forbes has said she thinks that's abhorrent and should be criminalised. Now, as I say, lots of people say, you should just pray for Kate Forbes. Well, I say I do. She's on my weekly prayer list. I can say that, and I think in terms of other aspects of being a politician, other aspects of running the country, I think Kate Forbes is and would be very effective in those. What I'm focusing on in this video is particularly the sort of intersection between Christian faith and Kate Forbes' role in politics as well. Now, Kate Forbes is quite busy on the Christian circuit. Recently, she was at a huge Christian conference down in the Royal Albert Hall. I would guess she might be at the National Prayer Breakfast soon. There was a church leaders prayer event recently in Scotland. I know Kate Forbes appeared at that as the special guest to help them praying for Scotland. And I do find this a little strange. These church leaders, a lot of them are very concerned about the conversion therapy ban. They think they're at serious risk of facing prosecution for doing their job. And yet they invite Kate Forbes to speak to them when Kate Forbes says, yes, you should be prosecuted for doing your job. Now, what's going on there? I think generally these church leaders don't know what Kate Forbes stands for. They don't take the time to investigate it. I'll come on to that later. But I think what Kate's learned is that when she denies core aspects of Christian teaching, that Christians in general don't notice or don't care. I think it's more don't notice, but I think there's a substantial amount of don't care as well. So Kate will have learned, as I say, you can say church leaders should be locked up for counselling people on the basis of their biblical beliefs, but they'll still invite you as guest of honour at their national prayer meeting. So Kate's learned that, but I think what Kate will also have learned is that you can't subdue your own conscience. So even though other people might be, quite happy with the things that she, not challenging her about things that she said, I think her own conscience will be challenging her quite severely. And I think in the longer term, in the years, decades to come, I think ultimately her conscience will win out, and we'll see that come into play one way or another. Now, I said in my last video I made about Kate and John Swinney, I said it's quite interesting when you talk to some Christians about Kate Forbes and you just explain that actually she said this and she said this and she said this. Quite a few Christians, they just don't want to know. It's not so much that they're saying it's not true, although some say that, some just won't believe that she said the things that she said, but they just don't want to know. No, don't talk to me about that. That's too confusing. I want to keep things black and white and very simple. Kate Forbes is good, she's on our side. And I said that in my last video, and the comments in response to the video illustrated the point perfectly. One person said, "You are in error." So I said, "Can you explain why? What was not true?" No replies. Someone else said, I was attacking the Free Church of Scotland. I mean, utterly bizarre comment with no foundation in reality whatsoever. But that's the sort of thing that comes out, and it's sort of quite concerning. It's like some people seem to regard Kate Forbes as being above criticism, a politician who's above criticism. I'm not sure there should be such a thing. And also some Christian commentators who might normally be pretty hot on the heresy hunting. If someone's getting things wrong or they're compromising on their moral beliefs or whatever, these people will be the first to be there saying, no, you're getting this wrong, you can't do that, you're going soft, you're denying the faith, you're denying biblical teaching. Now, there's some people who are normally like that. That's the way they commentate on the Christian world and on politics or whatever, which, okay, fair enough. But then it comes to Kate Forbes, and it's like all that goes out the window. Whereas normally they would be the first to be saying, right, what you said there is wrong, you're denying the real teaching of the church. It's like they're silent. They're silent. It's quite interesting. Now, the things Kate Forbes has said, which are in contradiction of traditional Christian teaching, and I believe in contradiction of what she really believes. Some people have said, right, it was in the heat of the moment. Okay, you're there in an interview, you might just come out wrong. Well, there's an element of that. Maybe the precise form of words used Kate might look back and say, well, that wasn't quite what I meant to say. But I think also it was premeditated as well. I think she changed tactics through the leadership election campaign last year. And she realised that she was going to have no chance. Well, she thought that she should have no chance if she kept being open about her views and so she really obscured them and denied them through the rest of the campaign. But even if that was in the heat of the moment, I would still suggest the right thing to do is just to say, by the way, what I said there, that wasn't actually what I meant. Could I just clarify, this is what I believe? And that's quite a straightforward thing to do, and I would suggest that's what Kate ought to do on some of these issues. Now, I've also reflected on the issue of why is it that Christians, well, not just Christians, people in particular, they think Kate Forbes stood up for her beliefs, got flack for it, and that's the story. Why do they think that's it? And I've come up with this explanation. There's some mainstream media. When Kate Forbes said, I would have voted against same-sex marriage, that's a news story. That's like a man bites dog type story. This is something really weird and bizarre. So yeah, this is a big story. There's a major controversy. People need to know about this. Front page story. But then when Kate Forbes says, no, there's nothing wrong with homosexual relationships, as far as the media are concerned, as far as the BBC's concerned, that's not a story. That's like, dog bites man. That's, Kate Forbes is just an ordinary person. So it's not news. So there's nothing to report. So people are just watching the mainstream media, unless they happen to see the particular interviews when she said these things, they will get they would pick up on the story. Kate Forbes says controversial things and gets flack for them, but they wouldn't hear the story. Kate Forbes denies aspects of traditional Christian teaching. And then you've got the Christian, well, media is not the word, campaigning groups. Now what do? They love to put forward stories. Kate Forbes, really great, well done her, standing up for her beliefs. That's absolutely brilliant. They don't do articles saying, Kate Forbes, she's denied fundamental aspects of biblical morality. They don't run those stories. I'm not saying particularly that they should, or am I? Maybe they should. Maybe it's their duty just to report the facts of the matter, to inform their supporters. But that tends to be the way it's gone. I mean, the Christian Institute published something just recently about Kate Forbes, how she said the song "Dare to be a Daniel, Dare to Stand Alone" was a great inspiration to her. But this was a couple of days after she'd voted for abortion clinic buffer zones, when she voted with 124, and it was John Mason who was the one who would stand alone and actually spoke up for the unborn, etc. So again, if the Christian Institute had wanted to do a Dare to Stand Alone article, it should have been John Mason in it, because he dared to stand alone. Whereas Kate Forbes had voted in a way, I believe, again, doesn't reflect her actual views. So, I mean, part of the explanation of this, I think people meet Kate Forbes and they like her. And she's very charming, charismatic, that's fine, that's a power, for good or ill, like any other power. But I think that's quite a significant factor. Sometimes you say something about Kate Forbes, you'll say, did you realize she said this? This isn't in line with Christian teaching. And the person will say, no, I've met Kate Forbes, she's really lovely, she's really nice. And I'll think, that's not an answer, it doesn't matter. That might be all well and good, but it doesn't change whether or not what she said is true or false, is right or wrong. I think when it comes to church leaders as well, I do feel that there's an element of sort of social standing involved in it. I'm a church leader. I circulate with politicians at the highest level. That's the sort of that's where we have our influence. I know the Deputy First Minister. And they're also probably thinking, if I stay in her good books, if I maintain a good relationship with Kate Forbes, maybe one day I'll know the First Minister. How good would that be? Drop that into my sermon. So that, like the church in general, maybe church leaders in particular, they feel sort of a bit proud to be associated with someone with such a high profile within Scotland. Which again, that's not maybe all completely bad, but I think there's a danger in it. I suppose it's the Christian version of celebrity culture, where someone's like, I don't know, you get the idea. Someone's like untouchable, put on a pedestal, and people want to be associated with that person because they're a celebrity, and they become beyond criticism. So that's a concern that I have. Right, coming back to the more political side now, thinking about the democratic system. I think Muslims show Christians how to do it in many ways, in terms of political engagement. Now, you might think that's quite a concerning thing to say, but let me explain why that is. When I spoke to Muslims about Humza Yousaf, the almost universal response was, he's a waste of time. He calls himself a Muslim, but he denies Muslim values. He doesn't actually stand up for what we believe. He goes along with all same-sex marriage, whatever, that we completely reject. So Humza Yousaf, he may be a Muslim, we're not interested. Whereas I think with Kate Forbes, the attitude with Christians is more, oh, she's a Christian, that's wonderful. We don't care what she says. I mean, she may or may not stand up for Christian values. We don't even know that, but just she's a Christian. So we're happy. Whereas Muslims, in my experience, the ones I've spoken to, seem to be a lot more discerning about that. I think with Muslims as well, look at the issue with Palestine at the moment. A lot of Muslims in the English elections last week, they basically said, we're not voting for Labour anymore because Labour didn't have, in their view, the right policy on Palestine, or Gaza-Israel conflict. So we're not voting for you. So the Labour Party has now got the message that, hang on a minute, we're losing some support because if we don't do what these Muslims want, they don't vote for us. So we need to try and start saying the things they want us to say. We need to start changing our policies so it's more in tune with what they want. And that's democracy. That's how democracy is supposed to work, isn't it? What Christians tend to do is they do the opposite. They'll say, right, this government, this party, its policies are completely opposed to what I want, totally opposed. But don't worry, I'm going to vote for you in any case. I might write you some letters, but I'm going to vote for you in any case. So I find it it's sort of sad in a way to see Muslims exerting this huge influence to do with Israel-Palestine, which I don't think is appropriate. It's not a domestic issue, etc. That's probably another topic. But they're exerting influence because of their strategy of, if you don't do what we're going to do, or what we want, we're not going to vote for you. Whereas Christian strategy is, if you don't do what we want, if you do the things that we think are absolute evils, don't worry, parties, we're going to vote for you just the same. And I think that's one of the ways why Christians in general, if you generalize, Christians in general are sort of uniquely ineffective at influencing the political process because they take a day off on election day. Now then, look at the Greens. So, well, that's another interesting thing. Now the Greens' attitude is, right, if you don't go along with what we say, then we're not cooperating with you. We're not going to vote for you as First Minister. You're out. The deal's off if you don't do it our way. Again, that's the way democracy is supposed to work. They put the foot down and they demand what they want. And I think I would love to be in a position in the Parliament where there's a few MSPs in there who are thinking, right, if you don't go along with what we want in terms of, for example, values in line with traditional Christian teaching, then we're not going to work with you. That would be fantastic. But at the moment, that's not there at all. Kate Forbes is always compromising in order to be allowed to be in the game, rather than demanding what she wants, demanding influence within the Parliament. So the mainstream parties, they've long since learnt the lesson that Christians might huff and puff and write you letters and fill consultations in, but don't worry about it. They're going to vote for you in any case. And once the parties have learnt that, then they're basically, in a democracy, you've lost power. The Christian influence is gone if you'll keep voting for the same parties. Now, this idea that you take a day off on election day, and then the government just appears by some mysterious process, and then once we've got a new government, you start writing letters to them and trying to influence them. Whereas, obviously, in democracy, the idea is that you put people into the parliaments who agree with you, who represent your views, rather than putting in people who hate your views and then trying to change their mind. Now, in Scotland, there's a regional list system which makes it realistic for small parties to get MSPs into the parliament, and that's what the Scottish Family Party is all about. Right, another challenge I would make to Kate Forbes is that, in my view, very sadly, in my view, it's just personal opinion here, it's not like family party opinion, but, in my personal opinion, it's very sad looking around, just looking around Edinburgh, that some, what I would have called, big evangelical churches are basically going soft when it comes to controversial moral issues. They're liberalising, they're relativising their views, and I think some members of these churches are saying, right, this is not for me anymore, I'm going to leave. But the church itself, I think, will start to mislead people, and they're being unfaithful to Christian principles, which is very sad. And my challenge to Kate Forbes would be, what part are you playing in that process? So if we think about some of the big evangelical churches in Scotland, the leaders starting to say, well, we're not quite clear what the Bible says about homosexuality, or well, we as the leaders think it's wrong, but you might not, and that's fine. We can all be friends together. This liberalizing process. Within that, people say, well, Kate Forbes says she doesn't think it's wrong, and she's a really prominent, very much an honoured Christian in Scotland. So I'm with Kate Forbes on this. Homosexual sex isn't wrong. So we shouldn't be sticking to this your old-fashioned interpretation of the Bible. Now, I would imagine that Kate would be horrified at the thought that she is playing that part in that process. But it's just logical, isn't it? It's just apparent that she will be playing some part in that because of the comments she's made. So I think for Christians that the temptation is to look at politicians and to look at their badge. And if someone's a Christian, then that's the person whose side you're on. What they say, what they do, what policies they propose, well, that takes a bit more effort, doesn't it? You've actually got to make some effort to listen to what they say, what they've said in the past, look at what they're proposing, what would they do in government. That takes a bit of hard work. But the way of bypassing that is just thinking, that's a person, that's a Christian, she talks about Jesus, so she must be on our side. She must be the right person. She must be good as a politician. But I think that is a lazy way of thinking, and it can be very misleading. Now, Kate Forbes has spoken about the way that she's been hounded, mistreated, attacked on account of her Christian beliefs. And she's absolutely right to do so, and it is appalling the way she's been treated. And as I've said, I and the Scottish Family Party have leapt to her defence vigorously on many, many occasions. But let's think about for example, the buffer zone bill that Kate Forbes voted for last week. So this is people, including myself, who will go and pray outside an abortion clinic, partly from the point of view of praying against the evil of abortion, partly from the point of view of being a witness, being a challenge to people seeing it there, and just like pricking the conscience of the nation by being there and reminding people that this is a grave moral issue, what's going on in these clinics, and also offering help. And that does prompt some women to change their mind about having abortions. So for some people, this is a really important calling for them. That's something that they believe that God wants them to do on the basis of their valuing of all human life. And Kate Forbes has voted for these people to be arrested, fined, and if necessary, imprisoned. Now, surely, no one can say you can't criticise Kate Forbes for that. Just because you want you locking up for pursuing what you believe is your God-given calling, you can't complain. It's not fair to criticise Kate for voting for that. Well, is that not inevitable? And also my challenge to Kate is, you complain about being the victim of prejudice, discrimination, and mistreatment, and yet you're voting for other Christians to be treated like this. Same with the conversion therapy ban. You talk about how poorly you've been treated, but then you say you support a measure that would result in Christian leaders all over Scotland being at risk of arrest and prosecution, conviction for basically doing their job. Now, when it comes to the buffer zones bill, maybe, I don't know what Kate would say, maybe Kate would say, look, if I'd have voted against it, all that would have done is it would have been a lot of bad publicity, and it probably would have meant there's no way I could have become Deputy First Minister of Scotland, because it was really bad timing. And if I had voted against it, so what? It still would have happened. Instead of being 124-1, it would have been 123-2. So what? Nothing would have changed. Right, is that a good response? I'm not sure it is. Partly I would look at the doctrine of double effect, which is a moral principle that it's okay to do a good thing, even if it has bad effects, but it's not okay to do a bad thing because it will have good effects. And I would suggest voting for the buffer zone law was a bad thing, even though Kate might have thought there's a higher good. It's more good is going to come from me becoming Deputy First Minister than is going to come from me voting against this act. So I don't think that is a valid point. I mean, in general, is it wrong to vote for a moral wrong? I would suggest that it is. I mean, there's a famous quote from someone, I think I know who it was, but I won't say because I might be wrong. But the idea that evil may come, but it's not going to come through me. And I think that principle should apply to every vote that takes place in any parliament. Now, when it comes to the conversion therapy ban, I've spoken to church leaders about it. And the church leaders say, oh yes, I'm very concerned about the conversion therapy ban. I mean, this is, yeah, I am under threat, they say. I could find myself prosecuted. And I say, do you know Kate Forbes actually said that she thinks conversion therapy is abhorrent and she wants a conversion therapy ban? And the church leaders will often say things like, oh, but she didn't really mean it, did she? I think, well, she did. It was pretty clear what she said. What they mean is she doesn't really think it. And I agree. She doesn't really think it, but she said it. And if you say it, what are you going to do when you're in the government? What are you going to do when it comes to a vote? Are you going to be speaking up boldly against it on behalf of these church leaders and parents as well? Well, I think the answer is no. Now, the strategy that some people imagine with regard to this sort of issue is in the early stages of your career, you keep your head down, you don't mention what you believe, and then you can wiggle your way up. And when you get to the top, that's the time when you can really start exerting your influence. That's the time you can actually reveal what you actually believe and start making an impact. Well, the problem with that strategy is like empirically. Can you think of examples where that happened? Well, I'm struggling. I can think of plenty the opposite way around. But the higher you go up the career ladder, if you like, the more you've got to lose and the more you're under scrutiny. It's actually the other way around. It's while you're a backbencher in the Parliament, you've probably got a bit more freedom to say what you think. But by the time you're in the cabinet, you've got a lot less. By the time you're the First Minister, any hint that you don't quite believe the right things, and they'll come down on you like a ton of bricks, and there's a lot more to lose. So ultimately, I don't think that strategy is helpful. Now, the other point that could be made as well, Kate herself might say, or someone might say, Kate can exert influence behind the scenes. So in the cabinet meeting, there'll be the 11 of them there, and Kate can just speak up on behalf of some of her Christian values where that becomes relevant. I say, but how much influence can that have? We're in a democracy. Ultimately, the government is going to be elected on the basis of the values of pretty well the majority of the population. So while the majority of opinion within society is against fundamental Christian principles, which it is, then we can't expect those principles to be reflected in the government. The key thing in the long term is if we're going to have government based on the values that we want, then public opinion's got to change. And how will it change? It will change by them being persuaded by hearing people putting forward a positive case for a different set of values. They think, actually, I think that's right. We need to go with that. So the idea that the direction of the nation can be changed from within the cabinet or within the government, I think there are problems with that. I think it's perhaps a little naive. Because if a government did change direction like that, and then they'd be getting out of tune with public opinion, and in a democracy, that's not going to work. So certainly with Kate Forbes, I would advise her to retract the thing that she said, which, again, I don't think she believes, but in contradiction of Christian teaching. Now, if she would then say, no, I'm going to persevere, I'm going to be really ambiguous about what I believe, I'm going to try and cover it up, I'll just mention a little bit here and there, possibly, when it seems safe to do so. Well, I'm not sure that strategy is effective, but I'm not saying it's like, evil either. I'm not saying like it's morally wrong. I just think there are problems with this. I think if Kate Forbes left the SNP, I think she could salve her conscience and speak clearly about a lot of these things. Is it possible for her to become First Minister? I'm not sure. I think probably not. But even if she did, would she be able to exert much positive influence in the areas I've been talking about here? Again, I think the potential would be quite limited. I was talking to someone a couple of weeks ago about this issue, and they were saying that being in an organisation that's basically bad in some ways, but being in it in order to exert a positive influence, that is a valid thing to do, which I agree. And the person I was talking to, they used the illustration of, let's say there's some newspaper that's just a terrible newspaper. It's basically, its underlying dominant message is negative, and all sorts of immorality promoted through the newspaper. But if they ask you to write a column once a week and you can say something good in it, then should you do it? Well, probably yes, but you need to balance that up with things as well. Because in writing that column in the newspaper, you're sort of endorsing the whole newspaper. At the very least, you're saying, I'm willing to be associated with this newspaper. And people who look at the newspaper and say, this newspaper is appalling, look at the lines they take, it really is terrible, then someone will be able to defend and say, but they've got so-and-so writing in. I mean, they're quite different, so it's not all bad. And so you might end up with more people buying this newspaper because they want to read the good bit you've written in, and therefore that will be helping to promote the rest of it as well. Now, let's carry on this newspaper story. Let's say you're in that situation. The good that comes from your articles that you write, you might well hear a bit about that. Someone might get in touch and say, that was really helpful, whatever. So whereas the harm that's done, which might be drawing more people to engage with that newspaper and to read it and to read the bad messages, you might not be so aware of that. So writing, a good column in a bad newspaper, I'm speaking very simplistically here, a good column in a bad newspaper, is that a good thing to do? It might be, or it might not. You've got to balance up those things. It's just a practical question. The positive influence of your good message in your column needs to be weighed against, to some degree, the fact that you're endorsing that newspaper in the process. You're lending them credibility as a business, as a media outlet. So, but then we're talking about a political party. That's a bit different, because with a newspaper might generally have one line, you come in with a slightly different line, that's fine. With a political party, it doesn't work like that. Because if you say, I am a member of the SNP, I am a representative of the SNP, I'm a politician, elected representative, then what you're saying is, you should vote for the SNP. I commend this party to you as the best option. So if there are aspects of it that are bad, then in being a member, you're still commending the whole package. You can't be in a party saying, I'm in this party, but I think it's really degraded, degenerate, or whatever. I'm just in it to change it. You can't do that with a party. If you're in it, you're commending it. You can't be in a party in order to criticize it. It doesn't work like that. You can't be a representative of a party when your main purpose is to change it, because you're commending it to people to vote for. So political parties are different. And the other thing I would say on that as well is, if you're going to join a political party, surely there's got to be red lines for you. If you're saying, okay, I don't like some of the policies, but I'm going to try and change them, maybe, there's got to be some policies that are a red line, that you say, I cannot knock on a door and commend people to vote for a party with such and such a policy. Right, what would those red lines be? Well, that's quite an interesting question, isn't it? Well, first of all, would you agree with me that there have to be some? I mean, would you join the Nazi Party in order to change it? Well, I would say, well, no way. So what are the red lines for you? Are there any? And I think you have to have an answer to that question. And if the killing of 16,000 unborn children a year isn't the red line for you, then I'd be interested to hear what was, and I'd be interested to hear why you don't think that should be a red line for you. That's a debate I would love to have with people. I generally find people are very unwilling to have that discussion. Now, sometimes I illustrated this with a little, sort of thought experiment. If you imagine you're in some democracy, some democratic nation, where there are two parties offering themselves for election. There's Party A and there is Party B. Party A promises to exterminate every single Hindu in the land. Thousands of them, they're going to round them up and they're going to exterminate them. Right? Party B says, we're going to exterminate half of the Hindus and the other half, we're just going to lock them up in concentration camps. Right, who'd you vote for? Now, sometimes people, their initial reaction is, well, you vote for Party B because they're not quite as bad as Party A. But then on further reflection, people normally come to the conclusion, well, obviously you can't vote for either of them. If you vote for party B, you're saying you've put yourself forward, saying you're going to exterminate half the Hindus, and I'm endorsing that. So they'll be able to say, look, we want to exterminate half the Hindus, and this is how many people voted for them. They'll be able to point at you and say, we want to exterminate half the Hindus, and you voted for it. You gave us a mandate to do this. So could you vote for either party? I think the answer is no. Even if you have to spoil your ballot paper or whatever, you cannot vote for either of those parties. The only option is to vote for Party C, or if it doesn't exist, to start Party C. That is the only valid option in that situation. And I think the same applies for the killing of the unborn in Scotland. Now, a lot of people don't like that conclusion because they want to vote for the mainstream parties for whatever reason, or want to be a member of them for whatever reason. So people don't like the conclusion, but I would invite them to explain the flaw in the argument to me. And I'd be very interested. I mean, in my book, I challenge people to complete the sentence. I will vote for a party that will continue the killing of the unborn because. And what reason can you put at the end of that sentence that justifies voting for a party that will continue the killing of the unborn? Well, to be honest, I can't think of anything to put at the end of that sentence that sits with my conscience, that in good conscience I can say. And I think that's the case for a lot of other people as well, but they don't want to accept the conclusion, so they might sort of become a bit irritated by the point being made, become a bit angry about it. But I'd be very happy to debate that with anyone who would be interested, maybe on our live stream. I mean, basically in politics, ends don't justify means. It's as simple as that. So how will things unfold? Time will tell. I mean, from a pro-life point of view, Kate Forbes becomes Deputy First Minister. Does that mean we're any closer to stopping the killing of the unborn in Scotland? I think not. And the reason I think not is Kate Forbes has promised not. She's promised that that isn't something that she is going to aim to do. Now, I disagree with that very, very profoundly. And if you want to comment on it, if you want to respond to what I'm saying here, then please do. But I would just point out again, saying that you've met Kate Forbes and she's really nice isn't an argument. It isn't a good way to counter everything I've said here. But I really am interested to hear your points of view. So comment away. Thanks for watching.